On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori Slilsinski disappeared without a trace from Auburn, Alabama. This came after confirming that she would be attending a pre-planned girls' night out at her best friend and co-worker's house. At her trailer home, her dog was left unattended, the air conditioner on, and the telephone cord missing. What could explain her mysterious disappearance? Did Lori leave town in a hurry? Or was it something more sinister? Today, we're looking at a bizarre disappearance solved after 16 years, located in Lee County. Auburn is the largest city in eastern Alabama. It's also Alabama's fastest-growing metropolitan area and the 19th fastest-growing metro area in the United States since 1990. Unofficially nicknamed the loveliest village on the plains, Auburn is a melting pot for cultures with its southern hospitality. This historic college town is the home to Auburn University, one of the most recognized public universities in the nation. Today's story involves a former student of this university, Lori Slilsinski. Lori Ann Slilsinski was born to parents Casey and Arlene Slilsinski on September 21, 1981. Gifted with blue eyes and blonde hair, Lori was always adored by her parents and her big brother, Paul. The family was originally from New York State but later moved south to the rural Alabama farm country near the town of Auburn when Lori was just 13 years old. As a country girl being raised with animals, Lori was an avid animal lover. According to her friends, Lori was absolutely beautiful. She loved spending time with friends, watching movies, riding her bicycle, and playing video games. In addition to all that fun, she was also very studious, and her family tried to support her as much as they could. After finishing high school, Lori enrolled in nearby Auburn University, where she majored in psychology with a minor in criminology. Her parents bought her a mobile home so that she could live off campus in a manicured trailer park that was popular with students. She was living alone with her beloved dog, Peanut, a Yorkshire Terrier. Her close bond with her family remained intact, with her mother calling every day to check up on her. In 2005, she graduated with honors from Auburn University. Soon after graduation, she took up a job in the East Alabama Mental Health Center while still living in the trailer park. She also made plans to go for her master's degree in psychology in the near future. Lori's family was proud of her achievements, unaware of any foreshadowing of evil that was looming over her head. On June 10, 2006, 24-year-old Lori had made plans for a girls' night at her best friend Lindsey Brown's house. They had plans to have a few drinks and watch a movie. Lori first met Lindsey in their junior year at Auburn University, already impressed by Lori's sweet, charming, and outgoing personality. The two girls became friends. The bond only grew stronger when they both got a job at the same mental health facility after completing graduation. Around 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, Lori called Lindsey saying that she had to stop at the store, and then she'd head over to her house for the movie night. Unfortunately, she would never make it there. Lindsey grew worried when she did not hear from Lori again that night or the following day. She called Lori several times and left messages on her home answering machine, but she never heard back from her. When Lori did not show up at her workplace on Monday, June 12th, Lindsey's concerns skyrocketed. It was very unusual for Lori to miss work and not inform anyone. After another no-show at work on the following Tuesday, June 13th, Lindsey, along with another coworker, went to Lori's house to check on her. When they reached the trailer home, Lindsey could not find Lori anywhere. Upon entering, she found the door unlocked and the air conditioning on, which was pretty surprising. She also observed that Lori's dog, Peanut, was inside his crate. He looked well-nourished and happy, as if someone was taking care of him. Amazingly, his crate was unsoiled, even though Lori had been missing for several days at that point. Lindsey felt that something was amiss, as it was unlike Lori to leave her beloved pet alone and unattended. Lindsey remembered that Lori had placed 3 rugs on her kitchen floor as the dog refused to walk on the tile. These rugs were missing, along with the outside trash can when Lindsey entered. Later that same day, June 13, 2006, Lori's mother, Arlene, got a call from her workplace regarding Lori missing work 2 days in a row. Arlene immediately tried to call her but could not get a hold of her. Afraid for her daughter's well-being, Arlene immediately left for Auburn after her husband Casey informed her of their daughter's disappearance. Upon arrival, she entered Lori's trailer and found a disturbing scene. She noticed the door was slightly ajar, and her bed was perfectly made, but there was no sign of Lori. Her car was also missing. With a closer look, she noticed Lori's kitchen rugs, a pillow from her couch, a Galileo thermometer, a green trash can that Lori put a rake and shovel in, and the phone cord for her landline were all gone. Alarm bells rang as Arlene instantly realized something was horribly wrong. She officially reported her daughter missing, while still hoping that she would show up eventually. As the initial investigation was launched and police scanned through Lori's trailer home, they could not find any significant evidence that could link a possible suspect. However, they noticed there were obvious signs of struggle and scuff marks on the wall. There was semen discovered on Lori's bedsheet, and traces of blood were also found on the doorknob. A coat hanger and a single golden hoop earring were also found at the scene. Police would soon recover surveillance footage on June 10, 2006, showing Lori stopping at an Alabama Walmart. That was the last known sighting of Lori, and nobody had any clue what happened to her after that. A tip would, however, soon come in later that afternoon. Arlene got a phone call from one of Lori's friends, 25-year-old Daryl Richard Dennis, commonly referred to as Rick. Rick told Arlene that he met Lori the day she went missing, and he thought she might have gone off to make a drug deal. Lori had met Rick Dennis at a bowling alley where he worked. She often hung out there when she was still a student. Arlene knew him because Lori invited him to spend Christmas with Lori's family in 2005. Lori felt bad for not having a family of his own. However, Arlene could not believe what Dennis was claiming, despite her daughter's close friendship with him. She did not believe that Lori would ever be involved in drug dealing. She thought that he was simply lying through his teeth but didn't have any clue as to why. On June 14, 2006, for days after Lori's disappearance at approximately 4:40 a.m., her car was found fully ablaze on an impasse near the bowling alley where Rick had previously been employed. From that point on, the investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a possible homicide. According to investigators, the fire destroyed any traces of evidence that would have possibly been found inside the car. However, Lori was not inside the vehicle at the time it was burnt. A hand-rolled cigarette was on the ground near the car, and a gas can was also found close by in the woods. This horrified Lori's family, and they were almost certain now that something very bad had happened to her. Investigating the information Innes provided to Arlene was their only clue at the time. When Innes was brought in for questioning, he repeated the same story he told Arlene, only adding more details this time. He claimed that he and Lori grew marijuana together, suggesting she might have gone off to sell her share of the weed they grew. He also added that Lori could have been dealing with shady people. Police raided Lori's trailer. However, even after a thorough search, the police were unable to find any evidence of Lori dealing drugs. During the interview, investigators also took note of several scratches on Rick's hands and arms, which he claimed came from his dog. More concerning things came to light when investigators talked to Lindsay. According to Lindsay's account, she had heard Rick Innes speaking in the background when she and Lori last spoke on the phone the day she vanished. Since Innes was known to be a friend of Lori, Lindsay did not think much of it at the time. Lindsay claimed that when she texted Rick inquiring about Lori's whereabouts, he said that she was fine when he left her. Lindsay also informed the investigators that before her disappearance, Lori had told her that Rick had written a love letter to her, feelings that were not reciprocated. Lori had mentioned she was not romantically attracted to Rick and was planning to discuss it with him. Investigators found out that Innes told her friends about his letter and Lori's rejection. When police re-interviewed him, confronting him with the new information collected from Lindsay, he admitted meeting her hours before her disappearance but insisted that Lori was fine and was preparing to go to the store when he left her house. However, investigators discovered several inconsistencies in his statement. They began focusing on Rick Innes as their prime suspect. Their suspicion only grew stronger after searching his car, finding several items of interest, including a knife, cleaning supplies, and handcuffs. To gather more evidence, investigators delved into his past, uncovering a shockingly dark history. Innes had murdered his mother and stepfather when he was only 12 years old. On March 3, 1993, just 10 months after their marriage, Innes beat his mother to death with a baseball bat after shooting her in the face in their trailer in North Montgomery, Alabama. He similarly murdered his stepfather with a shotgun. After the murders, he revealed his plans to kill his stepsisters, which shocked investigators. Although his past murders were gruesome, due to his age at the time, he could not be tried as an adult. He spent 9 years in jail for the double murder. After his release, he moved to Auburn, where he met Lori. Following Lori's disappearance, Ennis became the prime suspect, but without direct evidence or Lori's body, charging him for her murder was impossible. Ennis left Auburn, moving elsewhere and eventually settling in Huntsville, Alabama in 2007. By then, Lori's case had gone cold. Even after moving to Huntsville, Ennis remained the prime suspect. Investigators reopened Lori's case in 2016, and Agent Mark Whitaker of the Alabama State Bureau of Investigation, along with his team, started reinvestigating. Ennis remained their main suspect, given his past, but without more evidence or a body, proving his guilt was challenging. In a surprising turn, Agent J.W. Barnes discovered a crucial piece of evidence while reviewing the case files. He discovered a report in an envelope that had not been opened for 10 years. After Lori's disappearance in 2006, police collected evidence from the trailer, but no one followed up with it until the results came in. The results showed that semen found on Lori's bed sheet and blood on the interior side of the front door contained Rick Ennis DNA. After organizing all the evidence, investigators built a strong case against Rick Ennis and were eventually able to get an indictment order in 2018. By this time, Ennis was happily engaged to a school librarian named Elena Atkinson and was living in Pilot, Virginia. There, he was working for a company that designed and built portable living structures called EARS. On August 6, 2018, on his 38th birthday, 12 years after Lori Slasinski went missing from Auburn, Rick Ennis was arrested by a task force of U.S. Marshals. While it came as a relief to Lori's family, Ennis's fiancée and co-workers were shocked by this turn of events. After being arrested on 2 counts of capital murder, his trial was postponed due to COVID-19. The trial finally began on April 1, 2022. While the prosecution presented all the evidence that suggested Ennis's involvement in the crime, including the cigarette but in Lori's bedsheet containing his DNA, the defense argued that police could have taken the cigarette from Ennis' home and planted it at the crime scene. They also attacked Lasinski's character by trying to portray her as a drug dealer. To explain how his DNA got on the bedsheet, Rick claimed that he had consensual sex with Lori before her disappearance, suggesting that they were still intimate despite Lori's rejection of his advances. However, his story did not seem very convincing, especially when 2 more witnesses came forward with jaw-dropping information. One of his former co-workers in Alabama, Jeremy Brooks, stated that on June 9, 2006, just 1 day prior to Lori's mysterious disappearance, he received a call from Ennis asking if he could bring him gas and if he could keep the gas tank. Jeremy rejected his request. Later, after police found Lori's scorched car and a gas can, it matched the description of a gas can that was missing from the bowling alley where Ennis worked. Another of his former co-workers from South Carolina, Terry Booth, testified about the chilling experience she had with Ennis years prior. Terry remembered asking Ennis why he moved from Auburn. Ennis told him that he had to get rid of a body. Although he thought Ennis was just joking with him, the announcement of his arrest for Lori's murder proved otherwise. Although Rick Ennis continued to deny all allegations against him and maintained his innocence, jurors came up with a guilty verdict after 2 days of deliberation. He was facing the death penalty for the crime, but the DA agreed to take the death penalty off the table after consulting with Arlene. Arlene later said that she felt agreeing to a life without parole sentence for Rick Ennis would save her from years of potential appeal hearings, but would also ensure that Ennis would never be free. On April 14, 2022, he was sentenced to life without parole. He remains incarcerated in William E. Donaldson Correctional Facility in Bessemer, Alabama. For Arlene Slasinski, the outcome was bittersweet. With tears in her eyes, she shared that it meant she had to finally accept that Lori was never coming home, an incredible hope that a portion of her heart always clung to. Let us know in the comments section what your thoughts are on this tragic case. Do you think Rick Ennis will ever give up the location of Lori's remains? On July 31, 1999, 17-year-old high school seniors and best friends, J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, began their journey from their hometown of Dothan, Alabama. They were headed towards a birthday party for J.B. in Headland, Alabama, but the girls ended up getting lost along the way. In a phone call to her mother from Ozark around 11:30 p.m., Tracy informed her mom that they were heading back home. However, neither girl would ever make it home. Their lifeless bodies would be found the next day in the trunk of their car, raising the long-debated question of what might have happened to them. Did it have something to do with the party? Or did the girls run into trouble on the road heading back from Ozark, located in southeast Alabama near the Florida border? Ozark is known as the home of Rucker, situated in the heart of Dale County. It's a typical charming southern town, home to nearly 15,000 people. It's a nice place for both raising a family and spending retirement years. However, the town was not the sort of place to hit the headlines until the gruesome double homicide of two high school seniors in 1999, which baffled the community for years to come. J.B. Hilton Green Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, to parents Cheryl and Hilton Lanier Beasley in Troy, Alabama. After her parents separated, she moved to Dothan with her mother in 1984. She was adored by her mother as well as her stepfather, Joey Begun, whom her mother married after a few years. She grew up in a nice home in Dothan, along with her four sisters. JB grew up to be a very outgoing girl who was involved in various activities, including cheerleading, dance, piano, and swimming. She even modeled for several agencies along with her sisters. Besides all of her hobbies, she loved hanging out with her friends and family. It was high school when JB met fellow cheerleader Tracy Hallett, and the two did not take long to become best friends. Tracy Jean Hallett was born on March 3, 1982, to parents Carolyn and Robert Hallett. Unfortunately, her father, who worked in the Dothan Police Department, died when Tracy was only 5 years old. Her mother later remarried a man named Mike Roberts, who helped raise Tracy along with her mother. Unlike JB, Tracy was a bit shy but never hesitated to put people before herself. She was also very protective over her two brothers, who were much younger than her. Even at a young age, she was a responsible older sister. Tracy also attended Northview High School and regularly received good grades and was a cheerleader alongside JB. As both girls were blossoming into their adulthood, JB and Tracy were oblivious to their dreadful fate, which would strip them of all their future hopes and dreams. On July 31, 1999, at around 10:05 p.m., JB and Tracy left Dothan in JB's black 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party organized in JB's honor in Headland, just a few miles north. However, the young girls, being unfamiliar with the roads leading to their destination, soon found themselves in trouble. Within a few minutes of starting their journey from their hometown, they got lost. Around 10:30 p.m., JB and Tracy stopped at BP Gas Day near the intersection of routes 173 and 431 in Headland in search of directions. Using a payphone at that gas station, they called their friends to get better directions to the party. After the call, the girls kept driving to reach their destination but instead ended up in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, realizing they still did not understand the directions to the party. At 11:30 p.m., the girls stopped at the Big Little store. Although the store was already closed by then, Tracy called her mother from the store's payphone. She informed her of how they got lost and ended up in Ozark, and that they were now planning to come back home. At the same time, a woman named Marilyn Marin and her daughters stopped at the gas station to buy a soda. The girls then asked her for directions back to Dothan. Marilyn tried to explain the way as well as she could, and the young girls seemed to understand. Marilyn would later say that she noticed that the girls looked nice and polite with a clean and tidy car. Marilyn remembered seeing the girls pulling out of the parking lot and turning right just as Marilyn had directed. Although nothing seemed amiss at the time, JB Beasley and Tracy Hallett never made it home. The following morning, August 1, 1999, at around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother called the police to report her daughter missing. It did not take police long to find their first clue regarding the girls' whereabouts. Later that day, after Tracy was reported missing, cops successfully located JB's car, which had been parked on Herring Avenue in Ozark. The most bizarre thing was, despite having filled the gas tank the day before, the tank was almost empty. The car was muddy, the driver's side window was partially down, yet the doors were locked. However, police could not find any signs of a forced entry into the vehicle. Inside the car, JB's driver's license was lying on the dash. The purses of both girls were still inside the car, along with their cash. The only known missing item was JB's car keys. However, there was no sign of either of the girls. A pump was recovered from the trunk lid of the locked trunk, which gave the police a foreboding feeling that something was horribly wrong. Assessing the scene, cops theorized that the locked trunk could provide them with significant clues. But without the keys, they could not open the trunk. It took them 6 long hours to discover that they could open the trunk of the car with the help of an interior latch without needing a trunk key or a locksmith. Upon opening the trunk, police made a grisly discovery. The lifeless bodies of the 2 girls were stuffed inside. Both girls were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Both girls had been shot once in the head, Tracy in the temple and JB in the right cheek. Tracy had a 9mm shell casing on her leg, scratches on her arm, and her jeans had thorn briars on them. JB's clothes, on the other hand, were muddy and dirty, especially her newly purchased shoes. Although authorities concluded that the teenagers were killed execution style, they had most likely been killed inside the trunk. As the families were informed about the heart-wrenching discovery, authorities formally started their homicide investigation. Although investigators were considering robbery as a possible motive during the initial phase of the investigation, it was quickly ruled out after confirming that not only the girls' purses but also their jewelry, money, and credit cards remained inside the car. Autopsies later confirmed that there were no traces of alcohol or drugs in their system. The report also suggested that neither girl had been sexually assaulted prior to their demise. This basically ruled out the possibility of the crime being sexually motivated. However, more than 2 months later, the state crime lab issued a report indicating that there were traces of unknown semen on JB's bra, panties, and skin. The palm print recovered from the lid of the trunk also remained unidentified. With no matches in the system and number 1 to compare their evidence against, authorities were left without much to go on. As word of a double murder of 2 teen girls spread like wildfire, authorities were no closer to zeroing in on a suspect. A reward was also put out in an attempt to gather information regarding the murder, but it did not uncover any new leads. However, authorities seemed to soon get an unexpected breakthrough. On September 1st, exactly 1 month after the bodies of JB and Tracy were found, a longtime Ozark resident, 28-year-old Johnny William Barentine, walked into the Ozark Police Department to tell a bizarre story. He claimed that he had been a witness to the high-profile double homicide of the Dothan teenagers. Barentine told police that on the night of the murders, around the same time Tracy Hollick called her mother from the payphone at the Big Little store, he went out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son. He claimed that while he was out, he had witnessed the horrendous act. He returned home at 1 a.m., visibly upset, and told his wife that he'd been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. In the days following JB and Tracy's murder, when he shared the information with some of his friends, they convinced him that he should go to the police with this information as it could be linked to the murders of Tracy JB, which would not only help police crack the case but could also get him the reward as well. Disturbingly, in the 4 hours of interview with Ozark police, Barentine changed his story 6 times. According to then Ozark Police Chief Tony Spivey, Barentine initially said that on the night of the kill he had seen a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls were found. But as the interview continued, his story kept evolving and changing. Finally, he claimed that he'd picked up a tattooed man he didn't know, and the 2 drove by the Big Little store. He further claimed that the man, to whom he'd given a ride, got into the car with 2 girls, whom Barentine identified as the deceased Dothan teenagers. He said they ended up on Herring Avenue, where the man forced the girls out of the car. A struggle occurred between the men and the girls as they were trying to get away. After placing them in the trunk, Barentine said he saw something in that man's hand moments before hearing 2 gunshots. And when the man returned, Barentine again gave him a ride from the scene and then went home. In another version, Barentine confessed to investigators that he knew the man he'd picked up and given a ride to and identified him to be his neighbor. Alarmingly, Barentine himself lived less than a mile from where police discovered the bodies. Police did not buy his story, naming him the prime suspect in the murder of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollick. Ozark police arrested Johnny Barentine on the spot, charging him with 2 counts of capital murder. But there were several problems with his accounts. Barentine never mentioned sexual activity that would account for the semen on JB's clothing and body. Besides, the neighbor he implicated had an alibi for the evening. Several people noted that he looked startled and like he had just awoken from a deep sleep in his mugshot. Just after arrest, Barentine immediately admitted that he had fabricated the whole story in order to collect the reward money. However, police at the time believed they arrested the right person. In the preliminary hearing on September 20th, Alabama Bureau of Investigation agent Charles Huggins testified that Barentine was able to describe the girl's clothing and other items consistent with the crime, suggesting he was there at the scene. From the time of his arrest, Barentine was held without bond in the Dale County Jail in Ozark. In an October 18th bond hearing, Barentine denied he was involved in the killings, confessing to the judge that he never picked up a tattooed man and didn't see anything the night of the murders. He said that he simply went to the BP at about 11 p.m. to get milk for his little boy and later fabricated the whole story to claim the reward money. However, he was denied the bond and sent back to jail. Even during this turbulent time, Barentine's family members never stopped supporting him. They even gave interviews to the media, professing his innocence, saying he was incapable of hurting anyone. Barentine's lawyer, Bill Kimmons, also maintained that his client was not responsible for the double murders in any way, shape, or form. He further stated that the 4 hours of continued interrogation took a toll on Barentine, who had wrapped himself in this massive ally. During police questioning, he was never told that he could go to the bathroom or was free to leave whenever he wanted. Barentine's defense also pointed out the fact that Barentine only finished the 7th grade and a portion of the 8th grade. He said his client was in special education classes, indicating his inability to plan this heinous crime. Barentine was finally released from jail on December 17, 1999, after it was revealed that Barentine's DNA did not match that from the semen found on JB's body and clothing. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury declined to indict Barentine and cleared him as a suspect in this double murder. After Johnny Barentine was cleared of suspicion, the investigation endured a setback. The methods employed by investigators were also criticized. There began to be mutterings that the Ozark police were incapable of handling the case. However, police still had some potential suspects on the radar. One of the most viable suspects was a man from Michigan who was at a party the night of the murders near where JB's car was later found. Investigators discovered that the man, who was not publicly named, left town within days of the murders. Investigators had even traveled to Michigan 3 times to interview him. He could not account for 3 or 4 hours of time on the night of the murders and later made some suspicious statements to people. However, the police declined to elaborate on these alleged statements. As it turned out, he was also later ruled out by DNA. Another significant lead police were chasing during the initial phase of the investigation was the driver of a small white pickup truck. A video surveillance camera inside the Big Little store caught a grainy pork image of what appeared to be a small white pickup truck at the gas pumps at the same time JB and Tracy were at the payphone calling Tracy's mother. No digital trail could be traced, though, as there was no record of a gas purchase at the pump at that time. The video neither showed anyone getting out of the truck nor did it show the driver clearly. After releasing a photo of the truck to the media a month into the investigation, police urged the public to come forward with information. Unfortunately, both the driver and the truck vanished into thin air as the lead faded away. The last lead for the investigators was a man from Mississippi. Police said the man, who was extradited from Jones County, had been arrested there on an outstanding warrant for possession of drug paraphernalia issued in Ozark. The man had been staying with relatives in Ozark, but left 2 days after the murders. According to Spivey, investigators wanted to question a men's connection with the case. However, no significant information came out in light of this lead. Without any evidence, investigators were forced to let him go. In March of 2000, a woman called police and said she heard screams and 2 gunshots near Highway 123 South just inside the city limits on the night of July 31, 1999. When asked why she did not come forward earlier, she claimed she was scared to get involved. Based on her description, police thoroughly searched the area and discovered a 9mm bullet, the same type used to kill the girls, but the brand name of the bullet did not match the brand of bullet shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, The unspent bullet had no markings that would help with forensic comparison to other evidence in the case. Again, another dead end for investigators. Although several leads over the years proved to lead nowhere, investigators never lost hope in the search for a DNA match. As the heartbroken families of JB and Tracy tried to get on with their lives, the case turned cold. Then years later, another twist in the case added another layer to the thrilling mystery. After remaining cold for years, 2015 would mark a bombshell allegation in the murder case of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett. Rena Crum, a sworn Ozark Auxiliary police officer, came forward and openly accused an Ozark police officer of murdering J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett and others of covering it up. Rena alleged that on the night of July 31, 1999, a police officer for Ozark Police pulled over Beasley, demanding to know the whereabouts of some cassette tapes that contained recorded conversations. According to Rena, these tapes could have incriminated Ozark police officers regarding the illegal business of cocaine distribution and profits. The incident escalated into the murders of two innocent teens, she further alleged. Rena claimed that she'd been threatened by multiple law enforcement officials who had knowledge of the murderer's identity and covered it up by getting rid of evidence. Rena named 3 cops, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, accusing them of harassing and threatening her. She went as far as to say that then Police Chief Tony Spivey, who handled the original investigation, had also helped cover it up. However, she shied away from revealing the name of the police officer who she claimed had actually committed the murders. Renowned American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article saying that he believed the officer in question presumed the 2 girls intended to use tapes in a court case that was scheduled for August 2, 1999, less than 48 hours after they were murdered. The tapes were to be entered as evidence into that case. In this article, Carroll also stated that Rena was severely beaten with a fall bat after coming forward, which stopped her from naming the actual killer. Law enforcement officials Rena accused had all denied having any involvement in the murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever formally named as suspects in the case. Regardless of that, the allegations blew up on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Kaufman, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officials, filed a lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews for libel, slander, and defamation of character. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum received a suspended sentence and a $250 fine after being convicted for harassing J.B. Beasley's sister. Over the years, authorities investigated many theories. They interviewed hundreds of people and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It would take 20 years and the innovation of new DNA technologies before police could apprehend a suspect. In March 2019, investigators sent the DNA found on JB's body and clothes to the Virginia-based Parabon Nanolab, which specializes in DNA phenotyping and genetics using public genealogy databases. After analyzing the DNA, the lab finally made a connection to a suspect, Colleen McCraney. 45-year-old Coley Lewis McCraney was never on the radar of investigators in the brutal 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett until DNA implicated them in the crime. McCraney, who's an Alabama native, graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an athlete as well as the president of the Library Club. After that, he joined the U.S. Air Force and served there from 1993 to 1997. He was married in 1992 but separated from his first wife in 1994 and later divorced. According to the reports of Dothan Eagle at the time, McCraney's ex-wife filed a complaint with the Air Force in 1994, stating that McCraney had assaulted her. McCraney remarried in 2001 and had children with a second wife. Other than failing to pay child support in 1990, McCraney had no criminal record in the past 20 years or so. He'd been working as a trucker all of his life and had worked for several trucking companies in Alabama over the years. In recent years, he co-founded a church and worked as a bishop there. At the time of the killings, he was around 26 and living on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about 1 mile away from where the bodies of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett were found in 1999. 2 decades after the slain high school seniors J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett were found, Coley McCraney was arrested after a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama on March 19, 2019. In the interview with police after he was taken into custody, McCraney said he did not know the investigators did not clarify any motive for the murder. The news of his arrest was a great shock to the Ozark community and the Ozark police chief, Marlon Walker, who went to school with McCraney. As it seemed that the many twisted strands in this baffling case were finally all being tied together, there was to be one more revelation. The now 53-year-old Rena Crum, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the murder, recanted her allegations as she testified during a hearing for McCraney in August 2022. McCraney, now 49, is facing 5 counts of capital murder charges for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett. He now sits behind bars in Dale County Jail as of the time of arrest. His bond has been denied pending his trial on April 17, 2023. The news of finally apprehending the killer was a relief to the families of both girls. However, reliving all the haunting memories through the trial and hearings is another painful journey still to come. We can only hope that the families can heal through a sense of peace that their daughters are finally getting justice more than 2 decades later. Do you believe McCraney is responsible for the murders? If so, what was the motive? Do you find any validity in the police cover-up claims? Let us know what your thoughts are in the comments section below. On November 24, 1989, Central Washington University student, 18-year-old Mandy Stavic, suddenly went missing after taking a jog through her neighborhood. Her body was discovered by a search team 3 days later in a nearby river. So what exactly happened to Mandy? Did she drown while taking a swim? Or did something much more sinister happen to her? Today's case will take us to Acme, a town in Whatcom County, Washington, United States. It's located in the South Fork Valley between the northern Cascade Mountains and Lake Whatcom. The town is locally known as a scenic area and contains several camping opportunities along Lake Whatcom. Many people who live in the place choose it because of its good reputation, as well as its close-knit proximity to several parks and recreational areas. Mandy was born on the 16th of April 1971 to Glenn and Mary Stavic. She was not an only child but had 3 siblings by the names of Brent, Lee, and Molly. In 1974, Glenn and Mary's marriage came crashing down, and they went their separate ways. Brent, who was Mandy's older brother, died the following year at the age of 17 during a hunting trip in Alaska. Following this, Mary relocated from Palmer, Alaska, to Acme with her 3 children, and they began a new life there. Mandy was in the 7th grade around this time. She soon got used to her new environment and also became a popular face around the neighborhood. She was full of life, and it was just impossible not to love her. At school in her new environment, Mandy excelled, not only in academics but also in other extracurricular activities. She was a member of the school band, and she could play the flute, clarinet, and saxophone. She also had a love for athletics, which made her join the basketball team. Her passion for sports did not stop there, as she could also play softball and ride on horseback. She wanted to do everything, wanted to be very good at everything she did, and she was. She was a high achiever, said Mandy's mother. She wanted to do well in everything she did. She had it all going for her. She had a bright future ahead of her. The house where Mandy lived with her mother and siblings was located on Strand Road and was about a mile from the highway. About 5 miles from the house was a river, popularly referred to as Nooksack River by the locals. Mandy was in the habit of jogging around her neighborhood. She'd often start from her house and run westbound toward the west side of the Strand Road and down to the Nooksack River. It was her favorite route, and her mother, Mary, and the family German shepherd named Kyra joined her occasionally on a run. However, Mary usually rode a bike instead of jogging alongside her daughter. By the time Mandy graduated from Mount Baker High School, she was conversant in sign language. To top it off, she graduated as an honors student, and her mother's joy knew no bounds. Mandy had big dreams and hoped one day to become a commercial pilot. With this burning desire, she went to Central Washington University at the age of 18, believing that in a few years, she would have obtained her commercial pilot's license. However, After only a few months of experiencing university life, she realized that being a commercial airline pilot was not something she was passionate about. She just couldn't see herself sitting for long hours in front of the flight instrument panel of an aircraft. Due to this, she decided to choose a different career path. At her new school, she met Yoko, a Japanese girl who was also pursuing a degree at the university. The two were roommates and quickly became great friends. From Yoko, Mandy learned the rudiments of the Japanese language, and in no time, she was speaking it fairly fluently. Mandy was also in a relationship with a guy named Rick Cinder. It was an affair that her family and friends were well aware of. In November 1989, Central Washington University observed Thanksgiving, and students were allowed to go home to spend time with their families and loved ones. Mandy said goodbye to her friends at school and traveled down to Acme to be with her family. Yoko also went along with her. When the two arrived there, everyone was happy to see them. It was a full house as some relatives were also around for the holiday. Mandy quickly went around to introduce her Japanese friend, and in no time, Yoko was feeling like she'd been part of the family for a long time. The atmosphere around the house was generally lively, and no one had any idea that a terrible disaster was close by. The present was what they were all focused on, and they went about eating and drinking with no worry for the future. The following day, which was November 24th, Mandy and Yoko got out of the house and took a walk around the neighborhood. She used the opportunity to show her sighted friends some points of interest. When they got back to the house, they settled down to a tasty meal. Around 2 p.m., Mandy announced that she was going out for a jog. Mary could not join her because she was busy attending to the relatives that were around, and Yoko also decided to stay indoors and busy herself with something else. Mandy changed into a light-colored sweatshirt and teal-green sweatpants. On her feet, she wore light blue running shoes that had purple stripes. She also grabbed her Walkman so she could listen to music while out jogging. At around 2:30 p.m., she left the house, and Kyra, the German Shepherd, followed at her heels. That was the last time she would be seen alive by her mother. 2 hours went by, and neither Mandy nor the dog returned. Mary began to slightly worry. She knew her daughter was someone who kept a routine, and so she should have been back from her jog. It was very unusual. I was panicked. Mandy was so consistent in what she always did. There was no reason for her not to come back, Mary said. While Mary was still trying to figure out what might be wrong, Kyra bounded into the house with her tail tucked between her legs. Mary looked around for Mandy, but realized that the dog had returned alone. She immediately dialed Rick's number, feeling Mandy might have stopped by her boyfriend's place before finally coming home. However, when Rick picked up, it wasn't the word she was expecting. He told her that he hadn't seen Mandy, and she knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. After getting off the phone with Rick, she called the sheriff and informed him about what had happened. She also reached out to as many people as she could think of to notify them about Mandy's disappearance. In no time, a majority of the community, as well as police officers, were out searching for her. People came forward, giving accounts of seeing her jogging around in the afternoon of that day. Lee, my son, he was at the Andersons' house, which is about halfway between my house and Highway 9 down Strand Road, Mary said. He was there visiting his friend, Jeremy. He remembered seeing her jog by coming home, she added. The search for Mandy that day proved futile, and she did not return home. The following day, the search intensified, and Detective Ron Peterson led a team of officers to comb through the woods in various places around the neighborhood, especially along the trail where she was known to jog. But there was no sign of her anywhere. 2 days after Mandy vanished without a trace, a team assigned to search for her came across something odd. They were checking the side of the road when one of them saw a pair of green sweatpants. Mary was called to the scene to identify if the clothing items were Mandy's. I didn't remember exactly what she was wearing, but I didn't think they could have been. For one thing, they were dirty, and they had ripped holes in them. And Mandy wouldn't have ever worn anything like that, Mary said. Due to Mary's uncertainty, the pants were collected and sent to the laboratory for analysis to determine if they were Mandy's, but the results returned nothing that could be of help. November 27, 1989, marked 3 days since Mandy went missing. Her family was devastated about not knowing what had become of her, but they remained hopeful that she would be found alive. The hope was that they'd find her alive, Mandy's older sister Molly said. We just prayed that they would find her alive. You think to yourself, God, Maybe she's just hurt. She can't get home, she added. Officers decided to look at the surrounding water bodies and, with the help of a neighboring district fire department's boat, they began their search of the Nooksack River. Detective Ron led the team. We came around the corner and we got out of the main river and then into a little side channel, and I could see pink. Something pink, Detective Ron said. The object they saw was stuck in some river debris, and when they got close enough, they realized it was the body of the woman they'd been looking for. She was not wearing anything except for the striped running shoes she'd worn out to jog several days earlier. The search team stopped the boat, and Detective Ron retrieved Mandy's body from the knee-deep water. Afterwards, it was placed in a body bag and taken away for an autopsy. Mandy's family were informed about the discovery and the state in which her body had been found. They were shattered by the news. It was all too much to take in. I remember running out of the house. I ran off into the field, and I just remember screaming at life at God. How could something like this happen? Molly said. When news of Mandy's death spread, the community was thrown into commotion. The fact that a murder had been committed in a usually peaceful and instant-free place was unsettling, and residents began to eye each other suspiciously. Detectives immediately began an investigation to understand what had happened to Mandy. The state of undress in which she'd been found made detectives strongly suspect foul play. However, there was no way to tell this for sure since the area she'd been found in was undisturbed, and there was no obvious sign of struggle. There were scratches on Mandy's arms and legs, and detectives believed she must have gotten them while running through thorns. She also had an obvious injury at the back of her head. The autopsy conducted the following day after the body was recovered revealed that she had died by drowning. Detectives were puzzled by this because the part of the river where her body was found was shallow, so it seemed highly impossible that it had been an accidental drowning. There was also evidence to suggest that she'd been sexually abused, leading detectives to conclude they had a homicide case on their hands. They speculated that whoever killed Mandy had abducted her using a weapon, then sexually assaulted her. After trying to flee, the assailant caught up with her, striking the back of her head with an object and ultimately drowning her in the river. The first person suspected was Rick. He was questioned immediately, but detectives found nothing tying him to Mandy's death and he was cleared. To shed more light on the situation, Detective Ron, trained in DNA recovery, collected evidence from Mandy's body and sent it to the FBI for testing. An unknown male's DNA profile was established, but no match was found in the database. The investigation intensified, following up on tips and analyzing the DNA of about 30 men in Acme, but no leads surfaced. On December 4, 1989, a memorial service was held for Mandy at her former high school, attended by about 1,000 students paying their respects. Mary, in pain, spoke during the service about Mandy's survivor attitude and the challenge to learn and grow from tragedies. It hadn't been easy, but on the other hand, I have made some friends. Since there was not much to go on, the case went cold. Years went by, and Mandy's killer remained a mystery. In 2009, the case was assigned to Detective Kevin Both. He got to work and began taking a close look at the available evidence. I started going through who's been interviewed, who's been talked to, Detective Kevin said. He found out about a drug dealer named John Wozniewski who had been questioned in the past about the murder. At the time, John claimed to know who killed Mandy, but upon questioning, police were unable to extract any meaningful information from him. John's DNA did not match the DNA recovered from Mandy's body, so he was ruled out as a potential suspect. Detective Kevin decided to once again interrogate him and see what he could get out of him. He traveled to Cambodia, where John had moved, but ultimately, nothing came out of it. The case would remain stagnant until the unexpected happened 3 years later. One day in June 2013, two unrelated women, Mary Lee Anderson and Heather Backstrom, who lived near Bellingham, a city about 35 minutes drive from Acme, decided to take their kids to the local park. While their children played a short distance away, the two women sat with a group of other mothers and began chatting about their families and life in general. The conversation centered on the unsolved murder of Mandy that had taken place several years earlier. Suddenly, Heather said she knew who the killer was. With surprise written all over her face, Mary Lee also said she knew who it was. At that point, the two women barely knew each other, although they had both attended Mount Baker High School as teenagers. As it turned out, The two women had suspicions about the same man, Timothy Bass. Intrigued by the fact that they were both talking about the same individual, the two exchanged stories of their past encounters with Timothy. According to the story Mary Lee shared, Timothy was a friend of her husband, and one night while she was home alone with her child, he had stopped by from a hunting trip to use the house phone. After attempting to dial a number, which did not go through, he walked over to the bedroom where she was. There, he told her that he wanted to make love to her. Mary Lee was shocked by the audacity and threatened to call the police on him. He persisted with his talks, but in the end, she managed to get him out of the house. Heather's experience with Timothy, on the other hand, happened when she was 15. It was after a softball game in the summer of 1989, a few months before Mandy's murder, Heather said. "We decided a bunch of us to go to Dairy Queen," she added. She had been sitting in the front seat of a truck driven by a guy named Dan. Sitting beside her was Timothy, and during the journey, he began to aggressively flirt with her. He would talk about her eyes, saying they were beautiful. Then he took a pin out from a cup holder and started rubbing it along her knees because she was wearing cut-off sweatpants. Timothy did not go too far with this act, probably due to the presence of Dan. However, since that day, the memory stuck with Heather, and she tried as much as possible to avoid him in the neighborhood. After sharing their disturbing experiences, they grew more certain that he knew something about Mandy's murder. Mary Lee reached out to Detective Ken Gates, who had been her high school classmate and was working at the Whatcom Sheriff's Office. She told of her suspicion about Timothy and also gave the reasons why she had them. "I really wasn't ready because we're in a small town, and to accuse someone of something we don't know for sure is a little scary," Mary Lee said. Detective Gates and the other detectives assigned to Mandy's case began unraveling as much as they could about Timothy. What they found out was that he had no criminal record, but something else about him caught their attention. Back in 1989, at the time of the murder, Timothy and his family had been living in a house that was right along Mandy's favorite running route. Where he lived was not too far from Mandy's house. His family was well-liked in the community, and he had also attended the same high school as Mandy. In January 1990, he had gotten married to a woman named Gina Malone and moved to Everson, a city in Washington that's about 19 miles north of AC. The union between Timothy and Gina produced 3 children, and he was leading a normal and quiet life working as a delivery driver for a bakery known as the France Bakery Outlet. Detectives also discovered that none of the male members of Timothy's family, including him, had been asked to provide their DNA for testing. Due to this, detectives decided to pay him a visit at his home. When they got there, they talked to him about Mandy, but his response suggested that he could barely remember who she was. "That was definitely a red flag for me, which indicated to me that he was obviously lying," Detective Kevin said. "Everybody knew what the Mandy Stavitt case was, and she ran past his house every day. How could you not know it?" Timothy was then asked for saliva samples so that they could obtain his DNA, but he refused. The reason he gave was that he did not trust them. He told them that he had watched crime shows and seen how people went to prison after giving their DNA. This only made detectives more suspicious of him, but since they could not force him to give his DNA, they took their leave. However, from that day, they began to watch him more closely. Detectives also went to his workplace and met with a woman named Kim Wagner, the manager of the bakery. They told her that they were investigating Timothy and needed help in obtaining his DNA, but they didn't reveal to her what exactly they were investigating him for. They came in, they said that there's an employee here under investigation for a case, and they'd like to get root information and maybe collect a cigarette but in there. At that point, I just shut them down. I was like, yeah, no. This is way above my pay grade, Kim said. She immediately directed them to the Human Resources Department, and there, detectives met with a brick wall. The owner of the bakery refused to be of help after finding out what the detectives were there for. They wanted a subpoena or a search warrant, and we didn't have sufficient probable cause to get a warrant, said Whatcom County Sheriff Bill Elfa. It was a disappointing period for detectives, and they had to accept a temporary defeat. Around 2017, the bakery manager Kim, her husband, and some friends were having a random discussion in the comfort of their home. The topic soon shifted to the 1989 murder and how Timothy used to live on the same street as Mandy. At that moment, it occurred to Kim that detectives had been to her workplace years back because they were investigating Timothy in connection to the murder. A short while after this, Detectives went back once again to the bakery in the hopes of getting Timothy's delivery route. When they got there, they met with Kim. This time around, she offered to help them get Timothy's DNA sample. They had to decline her offer because they did not want to involve a civilian in their investigative work. However, they agreed to accept any evidence she brought to them. "I 100% volunteered to do it," Kim said. "The reason I wanted to know was I'm a mom now. If something happened to my daughter, I'd want someone to help me. And the thought of her mom never having an answer of who did that to her daughter. If I could help her find that piece, I wanted to do it." For several weeks, Kim had no luck with getting her hands on any item that contained Timothy's DNA. For some strange reason, he always took his trash home with him and was in the habit of wearing gloves while working. Then one day, he probably got carried away and threw away a plastic cup. Luckily, Kim saw him doing this, and she acted fast. "I looked in the garbage, and my heart was beating out of my chest," Kim said. "I grabbed it, and I put it in my desk drawer. I was like, oh my God, that just happened." She eventually passed on the cups to detectives who immediately sent them for testing. All that was left was to wait. So about 3 months later, we got the results from the state crime lab, and Katie from the crime lab says, "Kevin, we've got a match," Detective Kevin said. After hearing those words, Detective Kevin was overjoyed. He knew that after so many years, the case was finally solved. On December 12, 2017, detectives went to Timothy's workplace and arrested him there. He was charged with the rape and first-degree murder of Mandy. When he was interrogated, he denied having anything to do with the murder, but told detectives that both he and Mandy had been having a secret relationship. The reason why his DNA was found inside her, according to him, was that he had slept with her hours before she disappeared. When Mandy's family heard Timothy's claim about a secret relationship, they immediately made it clear that he was lying. "There's no way my sister would have a physical relationship with Tim Bass," Molly said. She was way out of his league, to put it bluntly. Since Timothy maintained his innocence, the case went to trial. But months before the trial began, his attorneys made attempts to have the DNA evidence rendered invalid. Their reason was that the way detectives had collected the evidence violated Timothy's Fourth Amendment right. However, much to their disappointment, the judge decided that the evidence would be presented at trial. During this period, Timothy's wife Gina filed for divorce. The trial began in May 2019, and during the 2 weeks it lasted, Timothy's attorney tried to convince the court that he was guiltless. However, many witnesses, including Timothy's younger brother Tom Bass, came forward to give testimony against him that further sealed his fate. When Tom was called to the witness stand, he revealed that while Timothy was under investigation, he had told him that he had slept with Mandy several years back. He then asked Tom to lie to the police that he had slept with her. Tom also recounted another incident where Timothy had asked his mother to also lie that they were Christmas shopping at the time of Mandy's disappearance. Despite all of these revelations, Timothy's attorney still tried to give an excuse for his actions, but the jury was not moved. They had made up their minds. On May 24, 2019, Timothy was found guilty of Mandy's murder. At the age of 50, he was sentenced to 27 years in prison. For Mandy's family, the sentencing brought a sense of comfort. Mary, who never thought the case would one day be solved, had the following to say: "Definitely closure, I feel. After all, they've got the guy that did it. He'll spend enough years in jail, so if he ever does get out, his life will be practically over." Sadly, the life of a young and ambitious woman like Mandy was brought to an abrupt end. However, there's still relief in knowing that her killer has been brought to justice. But do you think there was a chance that both Mandy and Timothy had a secret affair? Or was it something he said out of desperation? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. On October 11, 1991, Linda Little, a waitress at a restaurant in Daytona Beach, Florida, suddenly vanished without a trace after getting off work. Her disappearance puzzled detectives for several years until the killer received spiritual enlightenment while incarcerated, leading to a chilling confession. So what happened to Linda? Where did she go after leaving work that night? Was she followed? Or did an unfortunate twist of fate put her in the wrong place at the wrong time? Today's case will take us to the city of Daytona Beach, located on the east coast of Florida Panhandle. It's famous for its white sandy beaches and world-renowned international speedway, making it a go-to spot for racing enthusiasts. The city boasts several resorts, attractions, and, of course, beautiful ocean views that attract millions of tourists yearly. Let's first go back to the beginning, though. Linda was born on the 29th of October 1947 in North Carolina. Not much is known about her early life other than she grew up with 3 siblings and a close-knit family. Joy Little, Linda's younger sister, described her as someone with a lively spirit and whom people enjoy being around. When Linda was around the age of 19, she gave birth to her first and only child, whom she named Mike Parrish. It's not clear who the father of Mike was or at what point Linda became a single mother, but she eventually raised her son with the help of her family. In 1989, at the age of 41, Linda moved out of North Carolina and began living in Daytona Beach, Florida. Her apartment was a stone's throw away from the popular Broadway Bridge located in downtown Daytona, and she lived alone. To make ends meet in the new city, she took up a job as a waitress at the Chart House restaurant on South Beach Street. Everyone in her workplace loved her due to her positive energy. The pay she was getting at her new place of work wasn't really much, but it was enough to get by. Linda enjoyed biking and would often cycle to and from work, among other places. At the time, she owned a blue and rust-colored Murray touring bike, which she rode almost everywhere. At some point, she began a romantic relationship with a man from New Smyrna Beach, an area about 24 minutes drive from Daytona Beach. Linda was at a good place in her life. She had her job, a boyfriend, family, and friends. Things were looking up, and she seemed genuinely happy. Little did she know that her happy life would be snatched away from her all too soon. October 11, 1991, made it about 2 years that Linda had been living in Daytona Beach. Those 2 years had gone by in a flash, and it seemed to her like it had been less than that. On the morning of October 11th at around 1 a.m., she finished her shift at the restaurant and prepared to leave. Attending to hungry customers all night long had drained her, and she couldn't wait to be out of the place. She immediately changed into black stretch pants and a white shirt, said goodbye to her coworkers, and made her way out of the restaurant with a backpack. Linda was someone who was particular about her appearance and always had a change of clothes and makeup for after her shift, which she usually carried in a backpack. She got on her Murray touring bike and headed towards a bar located on Broadway. This bar was known as Matey's Brig Bar. She had plans to have a drink or two with some friends there before finally going home. When she got to the bar, she hopped off her bike and parked it in a spot she felt was safe. After doing this, she made her way inside the noisy bar and, in no time, spotted some of her friends sitting and chatting animatedly at a table. She went to meet them and joined in the conversation. Their talk soon centered on Linda's love life, and she was more than happy to tell her friends all about her new romance. She told them that she and her boyfriend had plans to go on a vacation that weekend. She brought out a map of Florida from the backpack she was carrying and began pointing out the places she and her boyfriend planned to visit. Linda's friends were excited for her. The one thing they didn't know was that Linda was not telling them the whole truth. She and her boyfriend were not going on any vacation. Although it was something they had both agreed on, much to Linda's disappointment, the boyfriend had called off the plan at the last minute because he wanted to go deep-sea fishing instead. It's not clear why Linda told her friends that the plan was still on. At around 2 a.m., Linda decided to take her leave. She said goodbye and made her way out of the bar. She got on her bike and pedaled in the direction of her house. She stopped at a 7-Eleven that was located a short distance from her apartment to purchase some chocolate milk and a donut. After paying for the items, she got on her bike once again and rode off. That was the last time anyone would see her. The following day, Linda did not show up for her shift at work. It was unlike her to miss a day of work, and both her coworkers and employer found her absence strange. On rare occasions when she'd missed work in the past, she'd call in to inform her employer or get someone to cover her shift. Despite that, her coworkers at the Chart House restaurant went about their duties religiously, and the day soon went by. They expected that by the following day, she would report back to work. However, the following day, there was still no sign of Linda. Her co-workers became even more worried and feared that something was really amiss. One of them decided to call Linda's sister Joy Little to inform her about what was going on. We all knew that something was wrong, Joy Little recalls when she was told about her sister's disappearance. A friend and co-worker of Linda by the name of Barbara Sheridan finally reported her as missing 3 days after she had mysteriously disappeared. Meanwhile, Linda's coworkers and friends were not the only ones who had noticed her absence. The landlord of the apartment where she lived had also gotten worried when he did not see her for days. He too called the police and reported her missing. Daytona Beach detectives, suddenly faced with the task of finding the missing woman, went to her apartment believing that perhaps they could find some clue there that would give them an idea of what had happened to her. With the aid of the landlord, they entered Linda's apartment and began looking around. Everything was in order, and it did not seem as if the living space had been disturbed. Her bed looked as if it had not been slept in. Due to this, detectives began to suspect that she had not made it home after work on October 11th. At that point, they knew they had much serious work on their hands, but they were determined to get to the root of the matter. After the search of her apartment was completed, they began questioning people in the neighborhood as well as her co-workers and friends. It was while doing this that they discovered that she had been to the Matey's Brig Bar and then the 7-Eleven store after her shift ended. But nobody seemed to know where she'd gone after that. It was all so mysterious. During their investigation, they also questioned her boyfriend since there was a likelihood that he would know something about the situation. But after interviewing him, they were still no closer to the truth. There was nothing that could be used to link him to Linda's disappearance. He told the detectives about the canceled vacation they'd wanted to go on, and how it had been initially planned to celebrate their first anniversary. In addition to all this information, they also discovered that the boyfriend was a married man. When Linda's family found out about this, they were shocked. They believed that Linda had probably not known that the man was married before getting into a relationship with him. Police intensified their search and even employed the use of the K-9 unit to aid in the search for Linda. Areas around where she was last seen were thoroughly combed through. They even began searching bodies of water, but all of their efforts proved to be futile. There was no sign of Linda or the bike she had been seen riding. It was as if she had just vanished into thin air. Detectives knew that something bad had happened to her, but there was no evidence that could link her disappearance to foul play. There's no telling what happened. "We had nothing to go on," said Daytona Beach Police Deputy Chief Steve Barrett. Linda's family also asked for the public's help in locating her. A $5,000 reward was offered for information about her whereabouts. In addition to this, they printed and distributed 3,500 missing person flyers. She was described as having brownish red hair, blue eyes, and a height of 5 feet 11 inches. Her weight was listed as 150 to 180 pounds, and a description of the clothes she was last seen wearing was also given. Some of these flyers were given to truck drivers to distribute throughout the country. Billboards with the same information were also put up in strategic locations within the city. As a last resort, Linda's family even turned to a self-proclaimed psychic to help find her. The following year after Linda went missing, her father died. The family was left to suddenly deal with the loss of another family member, which was no doubt devastating. In 1996, Linda's family received a phone call that was both shocking and mysterious. The man who called claimed that he had met Linda in North Carolina. When asked for his name, the man refused to provide this, and he immediately hung up. The man was never heard from again, and to date, no one knows who he was. In 2011, 20 years after Linda went missing, her family was interviewed by the local media. In an interview with the Daytona Beach News Journal, they revealed that they had not given up the search for her but remained hopeful that she would one day be found. "I've never grieved for her," Joy Little said at the time. "I've worked on her behalf because that's what I feel I'm supposed to do. I'm trying to get to the bottom of questions that have gone unanswered," she added. In 2016, the case was handed over to a new set of detectives in the Daytona Police Department, but regardless of how they looked at it, nothing made any sense. The evidence available was just not enough to make any tangible progress, and the detectives were left frustrated. The case would remain dormant for 4 more years until early January 2020 when something unexpected happened. The Daytona Beach Police Department was contacted by an inspector from the Tomoka Correctional Institution, also located in Daytona Beach. The inspector contacted them about an inmate who claimed to have information about an unsolved murder. The inmate in question was a 51-year-old man by the name of Michael Shane Thompson, who was serving a life sentence for the 2007 murder of a Titusville woman named Sherry Carmento. Thompson and Sherry had been childhood friends who had reconnected after he got out of prison in late 2006. He had been imprisoned back in 1994 on a long string of charges, which included robbery, grand theft, and burglary. After his release, Sherry allowed him to stay with her family for a few days. During his stay, he would end up beating her to death with a metal fence post and a hammer. He then dragged her body to the laundry room where he concealed her body under a pile of clothes. After this, he fled the scene in her vehicle. He eventually sold it to a group of people for an undisclosed amount. It did not take long for Sherry's body to be discovered by her boyfriend. Michael was soon found and arrested. During the interrogation, he admitted to killing Sherry. He revealed that she and Sherry had been intimate, and he believed that she might have knowingly given him AIDS. This, he said, was the reason why he had killed her. However, when an autopsy was conducted on Sherry's body, it was revealed that she did not have the disease. When detectives learned of these details, they were instantly curious to find out what he knew about the unsolved murder of Linda Little, which he had contacted them about. An interview was immediately set up, and Townsend sat down to talk to detectives from the Daytona Beach Police Department. During the interview, he confessed that he was the one who killed Linda back in 1991. Detectives couldn't believe their ears. To make sure that he wasn't mistaking Linda for someone else, they showed him a picture of her. He confirmed that she was the woman he remembered killing, saying, "No doubt about it, no doubt." According to his statement, he'd been living in Orlando but decided to travel to Daytona Beach to celebrate his birthday. He had arrived in the city on October 10, 1991, and had met Linda the following day at a resort hotel bar that was located at 701 South Atlantic Avenue in Daytona Beach. Unfortunately, it just appears it was a random meeting. And unfortunately, on the wrong day at the wrong time, Linda just met the wrong person, Detective Sergeant Denardi with the Daytona Beach Police Department said. After having a few drinks, they left the club in Michael's car. While driving, he suggested to Linda that they should take a shower for some reason, and she had gotten very upset. According to Thompson, she then freaked out and began to yell and scream at him. He, meanwhile, was growing increasingly angry at all the noise she was making. And when he could not bear it anymore, he hit her hard across the face with the back of his hand. Afterwards, he proceeded to strangle her to death. When he realized that he'd killed her, he immediately thought of his next step. He drove to Kenton County in the state of Georgia, and there, he dumped her body behind a movable waste container. Detectives were amazed by all the details he was able to provide. They knew then that the case was finally solved. In addition to killing Linda, Michael also told detectives he had killed 2 women in Memphis, Tennessee. After the confession, he revealed that the reason why he had chosen to finally come out and tell the truth was that he had found God in prison. Michael also claimed that his predisposition to violence was because he had been sexually abused by his stepfather and some family friends when he was a child. Daytona Beach Police Chief Jakari Young stated he blames his mother and other women in his life for not protecting him as a child. As a result, he developed a hatred for women. Detectives have tried searching for Linda's remains in the area where Michael revealed that he dumped her body several years back, but they haven't had any luck. Through the dedication of detectives, the sustained hope of Linda's family, as well as the confession of the killer, Linda's case was finally solved. But what exactly happened to Linda's body remains a mystery. What are your thoughts on this sad case? Do you think Townsend's childhood abuse reinforced his hatred towards women? Or do you think it's just a pathetic excuse of a mindless killer? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe.